Rest in peace, sweet Prince. 2017-18 Toronto Raptors. This is Raptors postgame presented by MasterCard. Proud fan of basketball in the North. Let's start something priceless. I'm JD Bunkis. He is Donnovan Bennett in the much higher chair today. Yeah, that was a tough one. That wasn't exactly the effort that you expected to see tonight. It was there for some stretches, but pretty damning performance. Kind of reminded me a lot of when the Raptors got swept by the Washington Wizards a couple of seasons ago, where they just didn't even really show up for Game 4. There was a stretch there. You thought that they were going to play with some heart and some emotion, but ultimately, once again, the two-star players, for the majority of the night, didn't even want to be there. They just basically decided, yeah, whatever. 1, 2, 3, Cancun. And they play with no pride for the vast majority of the evening. And the result was exactly what the box score says, which is a massive blowout, 128-93. Like, what do you say after a game like that? After the way you cap a season like that?
LeBron James pretty much scored as many points, had as many rebounds, and as many assists as Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. I mean, it's kind of that simple. He's that good. They're not that good. Thus, when he decided to try, he turned it on and Cavs swept him 4-0. And where you go from here, I do not know.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get in the weeds about this game. Why? I'm not really sure. Because ultimately, at this point, it doesn't matter. It really didn't matter because even if you got this one, chances that you're going to get another 3 were quite slim. And you're looking at a team, no first-round pick, no cap space. This is debatable, but for me, not a lot, if any, tradable contracts. The ones that the ones that you're excited about are the only ones that you could trade, and those are your young guys on rookie deals who, at times, were your best players in this playoff series. OG Anunoby at the forefront of that conversation. And so with no real flexibility, you thought the decisions were tough last summer? At least there were some decisions. At least there was something to debate. I'm not really sure what the decisions are now.
So, two things. One is I actually disagree in terms of tonight having no value, because I think that it is still more likely than not, and there is a case to be made about the Raptors running it back again next season. And as I said in the regular season, when the Raptors lost to the Cavs in those 2 games down the stretch, there is value in beating Cleveland and knowing that you can at least do it and showing some toughness and making God bleed and proving to yourselves that it is a beatable team because they beat you 9 straight. And I think there is a level of pride saying, you know what, we're not this bad.
So if they got today's game, lost?
Nothing changes for me. I just think for those guys personally that it was important for them. And if they do run it back in the future, that, yeah, having a win against them and then taking it back home and maybe extending the series to 6, who knows? That there is a value in that. That playing more playoff games against the Cleveland Cavaliers is not a negative for them in any stretch of the imagination.
I just think in the grand scheme of things, the trajectory of this team, the decisions that have to be made are not changing based on the last 4 quarters of basketball that we saw.
No, I agree with that. I still think that there was some value. 2 is, where we go from here is going to be very interesting. Because last offseason, it felt like the Raptors needed to make wide sweeping changes. And they did. They did make some big moves, but people thought it was going to be maybe the coach. I remember when we talked on the podcast about who it was going to be who got the axe when we heard the words cultural reset. And I thought it was going to be Dwane Casey, without a doubt. That, to me, reeked of Dwane Casey is gone. And after a performance like that, where, and I don't mean just like that one game, a performance like that all series long where, DeMar DeRozan doesn't play in the 4th quarter of a Game 3 when the Raptors got it down to a single possession and they could have just put him even in for offensive sets. When he ends up, I think I got it here, minus 77 on the series, played horrible defense tonight. Him and Kyle Lowry both. At least Kyle played with heart and was solid for a lot of this series, but can't really say the same for DeRozan. Minus 77. He had 67 points on 66 shots and played some of the worst defense I can remember a player of his ilk playing in the postseason in my lifetime. So, yeah, there are some question marks here. And it's going to be really interesting how Masai Ujiri navigates this. I would say this. I wish I could come on here tonight and just blast exactly what I think the Raptors should do and say, this is the way to fix it, or the Raptors have to blow it up, or be a super optimistic person who says, yeah, they have to run it back because what's the other option? Like, we'll explore some of them tonight, and we'll be discussing them throughout the evening with you. Again, you can give us a call at 1-888-660-590, *590, or tweet us at JD Bunkis, at Donnovan Bennett. Use the hashtag SNRaps. And you can share your theories with us because we want to know them. We want to know what people think. I've seen a whole bunch of different stuff, but it generally boils down to a couple of things. Either you try to blow it up, which like Donovan said, I don't really see the path to that because you do have a lot of tough contracts to move. And I don't think that you want to quit on a lot of these young players that still have, I think, higher ceilings. None of them, I think, can be, better than a third or fourth best guy on a championship team. I don't think they have any of those guys. OG Anunoby is the probably greatest wild card, but even still, I think that they can continue to improve. You can have the minor tweaks. So you try to move a Ibaka, you package him with some picks or a young player and try to use your mid-level exception, which you have, and run it back again. Or you bring it all back. You bring every player back, or you do something a little bit more major, where you trade one star, you fire your coach. There are a lot of options. Like, nothing will shock me, whatever comes this offseason. But I would say this. It actually reminds me a little bit of when you get pissed off at your boss or a colleague or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you want to send that angry text or that angry email. I'm sure you've had that with me many times, Donnovan Bennett.
No,
I
don't care that much.
But you're a smart man. And what people say is you should sleep on it. And you shouldn't be reactionary in the moment when you're at your highest level of emotion. And that's the one thing I trust about Masai Ujiri. And I think that's what happened last year, because I think when he took the podium, he was still super emotional. And a lot of his comments were very emotionally charged. And that's how we ended up with the cultural reset, which we talked about all season long. So I think that he'll be patient. I think he'll have his exit interviews. I think he'll be diligent talking to all the assistants, to Dwane Casey, to the rest of his front office, with Bobby Webster. And they will take their time to try to plan out the best course of action. I don't think that you're going to see the firing of Dwane Casey in the next couple of days, even though you could see it in the offseason. I don't think it's going to happen immediately. I think everybody watching this, and I'm not trying to be an apologist. I got no stake in this. Like, I don't care. Like, I care to see the best for the Raptors, and I care to see the best because mostly I care about Raptors fans, and I want to see them happy, and I want to see them entertained. I want them to remember how fun this season was overall and how great some of the moments were. But, yeah, I understand the frustration tonight, and I understand everything that you want to paint tonight, everything that you want to say tonight. It all makes sense to me. But I do caution, give it some time, really think about the best directions for this team. And I'm sure you've had a couple of nights to already think about it as we're down 0-3. But this is where we are tonight, man. This is where we are. And as of right now, and I don't know how you feel about it. Let me ask you first, actually. Like, as of right now, if you could have your Donnovan Bennett ideal offseason, where does it begin for you? What's the first thing that you look to change about this Toronto Raptors team, if anything at all?
I mean, it's tough because anything you pinpoint that you want to change, they were really good at during the regular season at doing that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the regular season is a massive sample size. Now, I understand that the regular season is a means to get to the playoffs and to sharpen your tool belt so that you can succeed in the playoffs, and that hasn't happened. But, I mean, the thing that jumps out at me, and especially in this matchup with the Cavs, is defense. These are the points by half. Like the Raptors have given up against the Cavs since the Cavs made their trades. 64, 68, 60, 52, 57, 48, 61, 67, 55, 50, 63, 65. Not good. But the Raptors defense was top 6, and the Cleveland Cavaliers defense has been terrible all year. So this is the struggle. Anything I pinpoint to say, well, they need to address this area. They need to take a look at this area. Depth. The Raptors' depth has been much better than the Cleveland Cavaliers over the course of this season. The Raptors' depth, if we're being honest, has been better than the Warriors and the Rockets during the season. So I can't say, well, they need more depth. They need more other options than than Kyle and DeMar, because that's what last offseason was about. And I know it's not fascinating radio to say I have no answers, but I have no answers. I normally have like a theory or something. I got nothing. I honestly would pay large money for Masai Ujiri's thoughts right now, for Bobby Webster's thoughts right now, who was outside the Raptors locker room as they left the playing court and was dapping every member of the team up as they went in, because you're stuck, man. You're stuck. And in sports, whether it's your fan base or your internal operations, a big part of it is hope.
Mm-hmm.
Big part of it is hope. The Maple Leafs were out of the playoffs a week and a half earlier than the Raptors. For the second year in a row, they were out in the first round. But that's a franchise that has hope and has some options. And, I mean, we could talk about how Austin Matthews was dealing with the media and whether he showed up in big spots. But there's at least some sort of pathway to their best players being among the best in the planet and the best in a playoff series or even a Stanley Cup final. I don't think anybody can say that about the best players on this team. So if that's not the case, what are we even talking about? You can make minor tweaks here and there, but those are cosmetic. They're not actually changing the landscape of this franchise. I don't know what Masai's thinking right now, but I'd love to know.
So there's a couple things that you just said that I want to touch on. One is that I don't think that they're without hope. I really don't. I don't think that they're without hope. I look at a lot of franchises in the NBA and not like no one else is the Warriors. There's one team that's the Warriors that's going to win. The measurement for the Raptors this season was never to beat Golden State. It was to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it has been a failure. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a failure. I've said before, the cultural reset did not happen to improve your regular season win total. It happened because the Raptors ran into the LeBron James buzzsaw 2 years in a row, and Masai Ujiri wanted to come up with a way to beat him. But I look at the players on the team. OG Anunoby, 20 years old. Jakob Poeltl, he's 22. Freddie V, he's 24. Pascal Siakam and Norm Powell, same thing, all three of those guys. Even DeLon Wright.
How many of those guys could potentially be the best player in a playoff series?
None. Zero. But what I'm saying is that you already have a bunch of these pieces that if you were trying to do a rebuild, that you would be coveting right now. Like if you really wanted to say, quote unquote, blow it up. If you were another team, like let's say the Raptors were the Pacers of a few seasons ago that couldn't quite get over the hump, or the Atlanta Hawks, who we just saw blow it up, quote unquote, blow it up, right?
Sure. The Atlanta Hawks were the Raptors.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is
beat to death by the Cavaliers in the playoffs.
But I'm saying, who has more hope right now? The Atlanta Hawks, because they're going to be in the lottery and they got chances to hit on lottery balls, or the Toronto Raptors with their young guys? Like, well, I think that the Raptors are at worst, if they do move off of the DeRozan and Lowry combo or anything of the sort, that because of the young foundation they have underneath, I think it does present hope in the measure of, I think that there are still ways for this team to compete. And I would still rather have a team that makes it to the playoffs in the NBA than is shooting for lottery balls. Like it's nice to say go for RJ Barrett, but you're hoping for at best a 12% chance at getting him, and you're competing with a bunch of other teams. And it would look like next season is going to look like Major League Baseball, where there's all these terrible teams vying for that spot. So
life is about expectations, right?
Yeah, okay.
And so certainly the Raptors, in their current situation, there are 20 some odd franchises who would love to win 59 games and be
that's
number
all
one
I'm saying.
seed.
That's all I'm saying.
Sure, but it's all about stages. And you bring up the Hawks. The Hawks had 4 All-Stars. The Hawks were number one seed. The Hawks had a coach of the year. And they got their brains beat in by LeBron James a couple times. And they said, despite the fact that we have Paul Millsap
Let's reset
and
the
Al
timeline.
Horford and Kyle Korver, what are we doing here? We have to be honest with ourselves. And if the goal at this point, it's nice we've got our number one seed and we've done some nice things, but if the goal at this point is to win an NBA championship, and if we're being honest and we can't do it with this group, then yeah, we have to blow it up. And that path is not certain, but doing the same thing against the same generational player, expecting different results. I mean, that path is certain. It's certainly not going to work.
But if you're trying to blow it up, like you're saying, because again, I'm saying
I know
it's
you're
on
not.
Table. I know, and sure, but I'm saying if that's on the table, you're talking about more than getting rid of DeRozan and Lowry, because we've discussed this before. Bench mob in the regular season in the Eastern Conference, like there's a case to be made that group still makes the playoffs.
Well, that's why you're stuck. That's why there are no good options, because even if you were to blow it up, even if you were to find a home for Serge Ibaka and Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, those young guys that you listed that are interesting, they're too good in a bad East that you're not getting RJ Barrett anyway.
I don't think that there's no good options, again, because even as much as I believe in RJ Barrett and you believe in RJ Barrett, and I truly think he's going to be a transcendent player in the league, there are no guarantees that he's going to be anybody. We all thought Andrew Wiggins, they called Andrew Wiggins Maple Jordan, and the guy straight up is the worst contract in basketball right now. He's the worst. He's the worst contract in the entire NBA as of this moment right now. So there are no guarantees with the lottery. I'm just saying I think that there are some good options here. And again, I don't want to sound like an apologist here, because I'm just as disappointed as anyone. I think that this Raptors team should have been able to compete with the Cleveland Cavaliers regardless of LeBron James. I think that there were a multitude of super disappointing things. I don't know how I feel about – I don't want to get too caught up in a moment here, but it is hard, I think, for fans and people, observers of the game, to see performances like we saw from DeMar DeRozan in this series and say, bring that guy back. Run it back with that guy as your best player. Or from Kyle Lowry in this game where, he was doing the same type of Ole defense and he's leaving Kyle Korver alone in the corner and just chucking up bad shots and having bad possessions. And I didn't think either guy played with any energy or any heart tonight. And for a group that, they usually say that quote, right? Play for each other tonight. Play for each other. And if your two best players don't do that, it makes it very complicated. So again, I understand all these things, but to me, as of this moment, I don't see a scenario where the Raptors, it makes sense for them to trade DeRozan or Lowry. If something came up, if a lottery team calls you and really wants DeMar DeRozan from you and is willing to offer you a package of a young, interesting player, sure. But if you're getting back the package that the Pistons gave up for Blake Griffin, like a Tobias Harris / Avery Bradley / Boban package, I don't know how that makes you better, because you're already so deep. You just said you already have a ton of depth. How are you going to find those places? Now you're shuffling deck chairs. Now you're not changing the ceiling of this team. If you can get some young players, if somebody's going to come calling and say, yep, DeMar DeRozan, we want him. We think that if with a fresh start somewhere else, we're willing to give you, we're the Phoenix Suns or we're the Los Angeles Lakers. And the Lakers say, listen, we love DeRozan. We want to give you Brandon Ingram. We're ready to pull the trigger on this type of a deal. You do absolutely do it. But I don't think you do it for just mediocre players. But I don't know how that makes sense unless you really believe that there is such a problem moving forward with those two guys that you just can't do it. So, yeah, I agree. All cards are on the table. I don't think there's a great option right now. I think that if you're asking me, when I asked you the question, what do I change right away? This is tough for me because I don't think it's his fault. I think he was trying to make chicken salad out of you-know-what. Dwane Casey this series had Serge Ibaka, no show on him very early. One of the most important players. Someone he probably should have played at the 5 a little earlier. He probably should have taken a look at that earlier in the series and figured out, JV versus Love wasn't going to work. And it took them until Game 4, a game where they were their backs literally against the wall. The actual first Game 7 or elimination game the Raptors played all year. And I mean Game 7 because they joked all about all these Game 7s. But, yeah, there were some things that Casey could have done better in this series. But Serge Ibaka didn't show up. Kyle Lowry had a bunch of turnovers and some poor defensive performances. And he was great. I won't pick on Lowry, but I'm just saying it wasn't a consistently amazing effort the entire series. DeMar DeRozan was straight up terrible, to the point where I wonder if DeRozan's hurt. I'm like, maybe something's off. Maybe he's got some type of injury because that does not look even remotely like DeMar DeRozan. Fred VanVleet wasn't healthy. They couldn't find a way for Bench Mop to get in as a unit in this series. They thought they would be able to. They didn't. So there were some problems with the roster construction, but I think that if you're looking at this Raptors team and you're saying, hey, we got to run it back because we can't get rid of these contracts and we don't want to package young players and picks, someone's got to be the fall guy here. You got to try to shake it up a little bit. You can't come back the exact same way, and it would fall on the coach. And that's unfortunate because he's the greatest coach in Raptors history. But there are some question marks as to why it took so long to get to an offense where you value ball movement and three-point shooting in this modern era of basketball. There are some questions about the lineup decisions throughout this series, about certain ways guys have been employed. And if you want to give credit to Dwane Casey for the development of players and the development of the culture and the development of the offense, you also have to remember that Nick Nurse and Jerry Stackhouse were integral in that as well, and Rex Kalamian, that there were other people involved in this and that this wasn't just Dwane Casey.
So, but they should then wear some of the blame as well.
I agree. I'm just saying that I think that
but
even if you're making
names,
a public sacrifice to people, unfortunately,
that are being thrown out to replace him.
Yeah, well, I think Stackhouse bears the least amount of blame because he wasn't a part of the Raptors franchise. He's Raptors 905. Like, he was an assistant for a while, but he has had tremendous success at the G League level. They've been to 2 straight finals. And all of the guys that have come up and had success have, like, who's his one miss is Bruno Caboclo. Like, that's the only guy that hasn't worked out under the tutelage of Jerry Stackhouse. And I'm not saying it's all Jerry. Like, this is Masai Ujiri drafting well and Casey figuring out good roles and good rotations and good amount of minutes and trusting these guys and figuring out that, you know what, a guy like Siakam, he's ready to play. Even if I didn't have him in the rotation, I'm going to move off of this quickly. Or a guy like Jakob Poeltl, he falls behind Lucas Nogueira at the beginning of the year. You know what? He's better. I'm bumping him up with the rotation. Like, Casey deserves credit. Like, there's no question. But I just look at that. For me, I don't see how after a year where the entire prerogative was for you to beat the Cavaliers and you to come up with a game plan to beat the Cavaliers, that he doesn't become the person that goes. If you're going to ask me out of the odds, I think one of Lowry, Casey, or DeRozan has to go. That you can't have all 3 of those guys return. And I think it's very simple to let a coach walk in the final year of his deal rather than try to trade a 32-year-old point guard like Kyle Lowry, who makes $27 million a year, or DeMar DeRozan, who's got a bunch of years left at the same price.
So you mentioned that tanking is uncertain.
I don't think you can do it.
And to go that route with caution. And I will see that argument, and I will raise you that firing your coach is uncertain. And
totally.
You proceed with caution if you go that route. There is not a great precedent of firing a coach who won 59 games. I mean, there is a great precedent of firing coaches who've won Coach of the Year. And between Quinn Snyder, Brad Stevens, Nate McMillan, and Dwane Casey, probably one of those 4 guys is going to be Coach of the Year. So let's say he has a 25% shot at winning Coach of the Year. The last time a guy who's Coach of the Year, best record in his franchise history, won 59 games, lost probably earlier in the playoffs than his team would have liked, was fired. That guy was George Karl. Now, George Karl, read his book, says a lot of weird things, but he coached an elite basketball team to expectations higher than anyone thought, and shortly after was fired. Now, the guy who left town before he was technically fired, but was part of that regime, and shortly thereafter was in Toronto, was one Masai Ujiri. So there is a through line there. But let me read you the 3 coaches since 2013 the Nuggets have had. Brian Shaw, Melvin Hunt, Michael Malone.
Michael Malone is a good coach, though.
He is. He's also under 500 and hasn't made the playoffs in Denver. They have. My point is they've never been back to the level with which.
See,
so
I think that example comforts me that you just gave me because I don't think
that they had something good. They got rid of it, thinking that they could upgrade, and they've never been back to that level.
But I don't think George Karl. Like, listen, I was a huge Seattle SuperSonics fan growing up. I loved George Karl massively when I was a kid, but I think he reached his time where he had to go, and there's a reason that he hasn't been able to find a landing spot again in the NBA, and that it hasn't worked out for him.
I mean, he was with the Kings.
Yeah, he had Sacramento. Yeah, shortly.
We don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how did that go for him? So,
sure, but
and I think Mike Malone is a good coach.
He won 62% of his games and was coming off the best record in the franchise's history. They haven't been able to find a coach who's been able to win 50% of their games since. All I'm saying is that the grass isn't always greener, and it certainly isn't always greener.
I'm not saying
right
it
away.
is. I'm really not. I'm not guaranteeing you that if the Raptors move off of Dwane Casey, it's the right decision. I'm saying that out of all of the options that are in front of me, I think you have to make one decision. I don't think that you can roll it back the exact same way again. I really don't. I think that's too difficult. I think that at some point, yeah, you're hoping right now that LeBron James decides to go to the Lakers. And that's your best course of action for you running it back. That's the best way you can make a case for me. But if LeBron James stays in the Eastern Conference, I think you got to change something. You got to change for the way that you responded in those games and the way that you just got eviscerated. And the fact that, it's been 10 straight playoff losses to Cleveland. I don't know how you can run that back with everybody.
But is Dwane Casey guilty of his own performance? Coming into this year with no Patterson, no Tucker, counting on a bench that no one knew what they were going to get something out of, trying to change styles on the fly. No one would have been surprised.
But it's not his offense. Like, let's be real here.
Sure.
Like, it's not his offense.
I'm just saying the expectations for this team between me, you, anyone was not they would be the number 1 seed.
I had them as the number 2. I did. And so did you.
Behind who?
We had them both behind the Celtics. That was it in the regular season. When we did our first initial preseason podcast, the two of us had that. And you know what? I remember distinctly, you can go look it up on sportsnet.ca, preseason predictions for the Raptors. I think almost everyone had them 2, and some had them 1 in the East. So I think people that were close to the team still believed that the ceiling of this team was going to be quite good. I don't believe in the narrative that the Raptors wildly exceeded expectations, especially when you consider...
Some people had them 7 or 8.
Yeah, stupid people, like really, really stupid people. And especially if you consider the factors that went into this, which is, again, Gordon Hayward going down in the first game of the season, rolling his ankle. Kyrie Irving missing 33% of the season for the Celtics. LeBron James's team having a complete overhaul in the middle of the year and not having anyone work out and having Isaiah Thomas's injury be worse than it was. Having teams like the Milwaukee Bucks fail to take a step forward and having to fire their coach midseason. Like, I'm just saying that the Eastern Conference wasn't exactly a juggernaut. And so the fact that the Raptors did improve over a few games and that they were able to beat up on bad teams with depth, like, I'm not trying to take away from them. I'm just saying, let's not be completely unrealistic here in terms of what the accomplishment was.
But
like, let's not put it into a category.
But if we had this conversation opening night, and he said this team's going to win 59 games, they're going to develop a real bench.
Yep.
They're going to beat the Wizards in the first round, and they're going to lose to LeBron in the second round. I think you would have on opening night. I think you would have taken that.
Yeah.
Because we all thought that this was going to be Warriors Cavs 4. We all thought that it was fait accompli.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying is part of the perception that we're looking at it through this lens now.
Yeah, we have to, though, because part of this was that there was a discussion and there was a goal that was set, which was beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is your best shot. There's no more Kyrie there. They had to switch their entire roster in the middle of the season. And guess what? None of the trades they made worked out. Ever noticed Larry Nance Jr. in this series? Oh, he didn't play until the very end. Did you see Jordan Clarkson? Everyone, when Jordan Clarkson had the ball, every single Raptor fan on the planet was screaming, shoot, 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 shoot. He was terrible. Rodney Hood. Remember all those Rodney Hood moments? Didn't work out. You know what happened? They relied on a bunch of old guys that have been there before that the Raptors should have been able to stick to the game plan on. And that's the thing that actually keeps ringing out in my head right now in terms of the case for going against and trying something new is I keep hearing Alvin Williams' voice in my head. We talked to him last Friday, you and I. And what did he say? He said something about this Raptors team the entire time I've been around them and the entire time I watched them. They just have a lack of attention to detail and they're just unable to focus on the game plan and stick to it and stick to the game plan. And we saw that again over and over again in this series. And we've seen it over and over again the entire time that it's been this core. And at this point, you have to look at it and say, all right, you know what, Casey, you've been great, but here's your gold watch. You're going to be you're a Raptor forever, but something's got to change. And if you're going to stick with this core and you're going to stick with this group, it's got to try to shuffle something up and see if you can change something. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't know if it's right. I just think that it's the easiest move to do. And it's the one that still makes the most sense for me the more and more I think about it. And again, I think that if you're guys like DeMar DeRozan and Serge Ibaka and Kyle Lowry, and if Casey does get his walking papers, that's an indictment more so of you than it is of Dwane Casey. No doubt about it.
So having said that.
Yep.
Since we're speaking in hypotheticals, obviously.
Yep.
You know the the names that have been rumored. You know the names internally. If not Dwane Casey, then who? So that's always, and I'm not saying to discredit your idea, but my first question when people say, "Well, you got to replace the coach," is like, well, do you have an alternative?
Yeah. Well, I think that your alternatives are more than likely in house. I would be very interested in someone who is a real offensive mind. And I think that the cultural reset did work to the standpoint of like your offense was good enough that I think that you can potentially bring back Nick Nurse, but I think maybe that's too close to home. I wonder if, and this sounds almost overly simplistic, but someone that if you do end up getting closer to resetting the franchise completely, where you do in a season from now, you're able to get out of a contract that like a Serge Ibaka is a lot easier if it's an expiring, and you do go younger, that Jerry Stackhouse is intriguing as a coach that has done very, very well with young guys, gets them to buy in, does have a real toughness about him, was a guy who could score and was a guy who knows a lot about defense. And so I'm intrigued by him. I'm not sold 100%. I don't know enough about him, but I think that as a coaching prospect in the NBA, if you don't, it's a kind of pee or get off the pot situation with him, because I don't think that you're going to have too much longer with Jerry Stackhouse. And I don't see the point in terms of like, hey, if you don't bring back Dwane Casey and say like, oh, your job is on the hot seat during the regular season again, because we agree that if you run it back, that the Raptors are going to be successful in the regular season. There's not going to be a reason to fire Dwane Casey in season. It's just not going to happen. It's stupid. You know what, though? That being said, two quick things here. Do you think that, like, when you're looking at the situation, I've been seeing this a lot in the mentions lately, and again, I want to get to the tweets in a bit. How much of this do you put on Masai Ujiri?
In terms of
just the roster construction, because I think if you look at their failure to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, some of it needs to be mentioned that as good of a player Jakob Poeltl is, somebody like Domantas Sabonis could probably have helped you a little bit more beat a team like Cleveland. That you don't have a team full of wings. You've got a team full of centers and point guards, and you don't have a great combination of a lineup that can beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. You didn't go super deep with depth. And that really the wing player that was most effective for you in the series was a rookie that fell to you in the draft, and you got extremely fortunate with in terms of his health and his development throughout the season.
Listen, I'm a Sabonis fan.
Sorry, I shouldn't have even brought that one up. I just meant like your roster construction is one that's flawed in the first place for you to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. And you did give Serge Ibaka a really tough contract. You paid Norman Powell before the season, and if you're talking about a team that's capped out, everyone was a Norman Powell fan. Everyone liked that deal at the time, but there probably wasn't as much of a need to rush to sign. I'm just saying. I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't believe that Masai Ujiri is a problem. I think he's been amazing for the Toronto Raptors. I'd be terrified if they ever lost him. But I'm just asking you, how much blame do you put on it in terms of the construction of the roster for beating Cleveland? 0? Like 5%?
Well, I mean, he's the one who buys the groceries. So ultimately, the president, and we'll throw Bobby Webster in this conversation, the president and GM are culpable. I feel like the Executive of the Year award in sports is a stupid award. Do you know who should win the Executive of the Year award? The guy who wins the championship every year. Because that's literally your job.
Draymond Green?
No, not Draymond Green.
He's perennially the Executive of the Year for making a phone call from his car.
Wow, no, you still got to re-sign Livingston. You still got to re-sign.
Oh yeah, that's why the Warriors win, is because they re-sign Livingston.
You still got to talk your owner off a ledge and say, no, we're not lowballing Steph Curry, you jerk.
Yeah, okay.
Listen, the Norman Powell contract, in theory, you could see what he was trying to do. He's trying to get ahead of someone who would become expensive if he played to his projection.
I wonder about that, though. I wonder how much more money Norm Powell could have made.
But I mean, we've seen it with wing players in this organization. There's a precedent.
But you think he would have made...
Terrence Ross got his money early. DeMar DeRozan got his money early. Yeah. After the fact, those contracts didn't look as bad. Terrence Ross was the reason why he was movable, because it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And you thought, okay, Norm could profile to be similar.
No, I get the logic behind it.
I'm just... That didn't happen. And it's a results-oriented business. So no, he has to wear that, certainly. As far as building a roster to beat LeBron, I mean, LeBron's won 23 straight playoff series in the East. Half of the league hasn't been able to build a roster to beat LeBron.
Mhm.
And I mean, in fact, there's Cavs fans who believe that the Warriors weren't able to build a roster that could beat LeBron until they got Durant. That if LeBron
I also believe that.
had a healthy Kyrie Irving and a healthy Kevin Love, that they win that first series. So I'm not really going to criticize them for not being able to beat LeBron, because no one has been able to in this era. The Serge Ibaka's contract, not ideal. If we relitigate that, tell me what the other option was going to be. Tell me what the better option at the time was going to be.
I think that you were better off letting him walk.
And playing who at power forward?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you could have had a better understanding in your organization of like what Pascal Siakam was, because I think at the time they didn't even view him as a rotation player. So I think that was a part of it. They struck out on PJ Tucker, but I think that you could have cobbled together, like, look at what Serge.
But they offered PJ more money. So
yeah, I know.
I
know they did, and PJ decided to leave. I'm not saying that it's a fault that they let PJ Tucker go. They tried to re-sign him. My point is that what you got out of Serge Ibaka this season and what you're going to get moving forward, and with the signs that were on the wall, I didn't like the signing. I thought that you could have cobbled together what you got from him from a different free agent, even if you had to do a bit of an overpay. Or even if you ended up having to do a trade to address a power forward and say, you know what, the Raptors are either going to play a little bit smaller, or they're going to move one of their other younger pieces who would probably not have had the same value. All those guys got a lot better and a lot more valuable this season, but do something other than commit $65 million to a guy that has clearly slowed down in his career, is very streaky, and doesn't have the type of edge or toughness to elevate the Raptors play in big time crunch time moments, and can be a bit of an anchor at times as well. So I'm not saying it's, again, I don't look at Masai Ujiri and say, like, you're a problem, but I do think that it should be acknowledged. And when you're trying to be fair to Dwane Casey and all of this, because again, I do think that he's going to end up being the fall guy, that this isn't all his fault, that he was dealing with some problems with the roster construction, and that there's only so much you can do when Serge Ibaka doesn't show up for you in 3 of the 4 Raptors games. And yeah, you could have employed your roster differently, but you were dealing with some really tough things from a roster composition standpoint against that Cavs team. That's all. And I'm just trying to analyze everything. That this isn't a problem by one DeMar DeRozan or one Kyle Lowry or one Serge Ibaka or one Masai Ujiri or one Dwane Casey. That it's a comprehensive problem for beating the Cavaliers. And it's tricky because it really does seem to crop up more against that Cavs team and one of the greatest players of all time than anybody else.
Well, and the executive is culpable. He makes the decisions, and when they win, they get credit, and when they lose, they need to wear some of the blame. This is why in a cap league like the NBA, like the NHL, it's really imperative that you win when your stars are young, thus on lower money. Because there isn't a great precedent aside from LeBron James, and now we'll see if the Warriors are able to do it for the next couple of years. It's hard to win when your big players are making big money, because it's tough to put any sort of roster around them.
Oh, see, I think that's okay. It's about the guys that are around them. You can't make bad contracts. You can pay your max players. You can pay those guys whatever. Because that's the benefit of the league. To me, the issue is that when you screw up the contracts around them, when you blow your money on dudes that don't matter, that don't factor into your rotation or don't make close to what their salaries are in comparison to those stars.
But what I'm saying is, when your max guys, so in this case, I mean, Kyle didn't really get the max, but on a per year basis, he's making the same as DeMar. So let's put him in that conversation. DeMar and Kyle, when they're making per year around the same amount of money as LeBron James and Steph Curry.
But that's a problem for everyone.
And that's what I mean. When you have to, if you're going to challenge those guys, you have to do it when your stars are young, because then you have the leeway to make mistakes around them and still fill out the roster with elite talent. Which is why I think, to be honest, I think the Sixers window is the next couple years, because when you have to pay Embiid and you have to pay Simmons, you're not going to be able to bring in
especially when Embiid's on the shelf and you're paying him max contract for 25 games a year.
He's not Greg Oden.
So
not yet.
So it's going to be a complicated offseason. It's going to be, I think, a bit of an emotional offseason. Sorry, go ahead.
Before we move on, because you mentioned a bunch of things, let me address one. You mentioned the coaches and the internal options.
Do you have one preference? You actually know. I think you're a little bit closer. Like have you done a feature with Stackhouse before?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
So the issue with Nurse and Kalamian, Nurse, I think is a little bit different.
I think Kalamian has zero shot. I think it's
because he has to wear the defense.
Yeah.
His real strength is he has a great relationship with players, both on this team but also around the league. Nurse is a
How'd
guy.
that work for Scott Brooks? I just say no. Sorry to cut you off. I couldn't help myself. I just love hating on Scott Brooks.
The Nurse at least hasn't been here the entire time. Was brought in for a specific reason with new ideas, and those ideas have seemed to work. But for me, I think the guy who actually fills the void that this team needs, if you were going to make a change, and I'm not advocating for one, but the only one I really am willing to entertain would be Stackhouse. Because
I'm more intrigued by Stackhouse as well.
Because some of the issues that this team has with competing, with attention to detail and focus, Stackhouse, not to a Sam Mitchell level, but Stackhouse will damn near choke you out if you're not paying attention in a meeting or if you don't listen to him after he's gone over something in a timeout. And so I think he would demand that level of respect from someone who's been in the wars and understands what that focus means, but also is able to communicate it. The other thing is you've developed him, and I give him credit for not saying I'm an ex-player. I want to coach right now.
Mm-hmm.
Kerr coached with no coaching experience. Kid did it. Why can't I? He actually not only was willing to be an assistant as a star player, it's something you don't see. He was willing to go to at the time D-League, now G-League, to actually learn how to coach.
Well, I also like that Jerry Stackhouse was the type of guy who throughout his career has been a leading scorer on his team. He's been the best player on his team, and he's also been an old veteran end-of-the-line guy on his team. He's been in every single role. He's seen a whole bunch of different offenses and defenses as a guy who's been around everywhere.
He
is very tough. I'll tell you what, with Jerry Stackhouse, you know how after Game 3, Dwane Casey said the plan was to trap LeBron and get the ball out of LeBron's hands, and then OG said there was no plan? You know what? There's a case maybe that they weren't listening to Dwane Casey. I promise you this. Jerry Stackhouse in the huddle at the end of a ball game telling you what's up, guys be listening. And again, I hate doing this to Dwane Casey because I really do think he's a good coach. And I think that, I talked to Brian Windhorst today, and he said if Casey gets fired, he'd have a job in 7 or 8 days. And that's one of the more connected guys in the league. So that's what you're talking about giving up here. But I do think something has to change, and he's the most likely thing to go.
And the other thing with Stackhouse, before we move on, is you better, if you like him that much, you better make a move now. Because Casey will, I agree, have a job in 7 or 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Stackhouse is going to have a job in 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
so
I think 1.
For you to be able to stash him for as long as you already have is a massive win. So if you think he can be, a hood version of Brad Stevens, well, you better make a move right now because he's not going to be that.
A hood version of Brad Stevens.
Yeah. It's not as professorial, but will scare you into making the right rotation.
All right. With that, let's go to the phones and let's go to the tweets. 1-888-660-590 at JD Bunkis, at Donnovan Bennett, hashtag SN590. There's so much stuff to go through here. I want to start with this one, though, but from Randall, at Rand Scott, says, did Raps fans get frauded by the cultural reset, or should we have seen this coming? Yeah, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan aren't elite. However, really young team, but I can't remember a number 1 seed looking this bad in the second round. Not sure who's to blame for the collapse. Hashtag RTZ. I don't think that first of all, I'll just say this. The regular season has never been devalued to the point as over the last couple of seasons. So we really haven't seen this many types of 1 seeds before. But I would say that, you know what, the Atlanta Hawks got exposed as a 1 seed in a very similar fashion to the Toronto Raptors. And that had the Raptors been a 1 seed and looked this way to anybody other than the Cavs, I'd have put more on it. I don't think it was a fraud. Cultural reset to me was not a fraud. I think the one thing we might have overestimated is that the steps DeMar DeRozan took in his game. Because he's an awesome, awesome scorer. He truly is a generational scoring talent. And he's someone who doesn't shoot threes. But I think when it comes to the playoffs, and you have a mind like LeBron James and Ty Lue working together with an entire roster and saying, okay, we'll make the Raptors beat us with anybody other than DeRozan. He still easier than other stars to game plan for because he does not have that shooting, because he can lack confidence at times. And he can be shook. We've seen it before, and we know it's a possibility with him. And there doesn't always seem that second gear with DeRozan is not a given. So, yeah, I think that we might have overestimated exactly the changes in the ceiling of DeMar DeRozan a little, and his impact on the reset is maybe the only thing. Like, it's not fraudulent because he's a really good player, but I think we may have talked ourselves into him being a little bit better than he actually is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I the thing with DeMar is every time I have counted him out, he's come back and proved me wrong.
Except for in the playoffs. He's never proven you wrong.
True. But
that's except for the times.
I mean, I'm talking about adding things to his game.
Sure, but that's what I'm saying, though, is that we talked about him adding the three-point shot to his game, and he missed every single three he took against the Cavs this playoffs. You know what I'd like to see him add to his game? Biggest problem for me with DeMar DeRozan is that he kills you defensively. And in this series, watching him, like in tonight's game, make George Hill look like he was Kobe Bryant for a couple of possessions, and watching him off the ball, especially where a predictable screen is coming and he doesn't fight through it and it results in a wide open shooter knocking something down, like that stuff is just, I don't know, like, I don't know how you teach that to someone who's his age and who should know better and has the athletic ability to do better at this point.
Can I read a terrible tweet?
I mean, if you want to blow it up, what do you want to say? You read it.
Frank Falco. When is the fake by the Lake Raptors going to be serious and try to win championships? Spend some money and sign LeBron.
Well, it's just okay.
24 years and not once have they spent money into the tax. Endless he laughing all the way to the bank. Keep spending your money, Toronto fans. You don't want to pay the tax. The tax is punitive. Why would you want to pay the tax? Listen, you know who they would pay it for? LeBron James, if he wanted to come here.
And also, they're going to pay it into the tax this year, potentially. And
you don't want to pay the repeater.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. That was a tough one for me to hear. That's obviously, not the tough one.
But this is not a organizational issue. This is not MLSE is not committed to winning basketball. I think the question is, how committed will they be to a rebuild? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me to read. From our friend Brennan Delaney, at Brennan Delaney. I said after game 2, and our friend was positive. Who said the positive vibes out after game 2? Brennan. I said after game 2 that blowing it up would be insane. After game 4, I'm not sure anymore. I'd keep OG, Siakam, and Pirtle, but after that, no one is safe. Anyways, through the playoffs, see you next year, boys. # SN Raps. I'd say this. To me, the two guys that I don't want to hear involved in any trade are Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby. And everybody else, I wouldn't like to see Pascal Siakam go. I wouldn't like to see DeLon Wright go. I wouldn't like to see Jakob Poeltl. But those two guys are my top two guys that I want to keep.
An undrafted player that up until this year had played more games in the G League than in the NBA, and a guy who fell to you in the draft, had a knee injury and wasn't supposed to play until Christmas.
Yeah, those are the two guys I want to build around. Not build around, but that I'm least excited about the Raptors giving up. And I've been a huge Siakam fan, and I still believe in Siakam. I'm very optimistic about his future, but I will say that the playoffs were a little bit eye-opening for me in terms of just a couple of things. And watching some of the defensive issues, especially in this Cavs series, and I shouldn't say issues when you're guarding LeBron James, but just like how OG Anunoby was a better defender on LeBron than Pascal was. And I wouldn't have expected that heading into the series. I thought Pascal was going to be super important, and him getting bodied by Love, and then just how little he was giving you offensively throughout the series. I think he can develop that three-point shot, sure, but I was less confident about his game a little bit than I was originally before. I get a lot of these, and I just want to say it. I'm just going to get out of here. So this one's from SL_16. Honestly, what do you do if not go for Kawhi? And I've had people in my DMs asking about Kawhi and Kawhi this, and there's always Kawhi stuff. Raps aren't getting Kawhi, all right? They're not getting Kawhi. 0%. 0% Kawhi Leonard is coming here.
I can't wait for them to play this sound in the montage.
Oh, my God. Listen, let it be. I'd be so happy if Freezing Cold takes or I get put in a montage of Kawhi Leonard, but if Kawhi Leonard becomes available, there's going to be teams that can outbid the Raptors, period. And they don't have an asset, even OG Anunoby, that makes it more worthwhile than what other teams can give up for Kawhi Leonard. And
Well, Kawhi has to be traded.
yes,
one.
and two, but Kawhi's not getting traded unless he tells his agent or his agent tells that team, Kawhi will resign with you. He's not going to, no one's going to give up a buttload to get 1 year of Kawhi Leonard, not going to mortgage the future for him or not going to pay what they need to. Plus, I actually still believe Kawhi is going to work it out with the Spurs.
That's assuming the Spurs want to work it out with Kawhi.
I think they do. I don't think that you can move off of a guy like that.
There's a franchise that's all about culture, and the way that relationship has gone has not.
Did you read the ESPN piece?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little
3
bit more up to. Yeah, it was long. And I was like, wait, what was the part in here that was the big part? It was like scanning through it. I couldn't find I was like, where's the thing? Where's the thing? Anyway, Nelly Swan taking in post game with Donnovan Bennett, Jay Bunkis, because misery loves company. Thanks, Nelly, for joining us. Sorry about feeling miserable. Ali Jawanshir at Dunno It's Ali. Hashtag SN Raps. I just can't see how you expect to make an NBA Finals when your best player, in quotes, lives off tough shots, can't shoot threes, and doesn't play D. I mean, I just talked about it. I don't think you can make. I don't know if you can make an NBA Finals with DeMar DeRozan as your best player anymore either.
I mean, the Houston Rockets are trying to win an NBA Finals with a player who does all those things, but he's just better at it.
Well, no, but he also shoots threes.
Oh, I didn't hear the shoot.
Yeah, sorry. James Harden's like he's got a higher offensive ceiling. Raptors stars show up in the playoffs, don't show up in the playoffs, period. DeRozan's not a star, an all-star from the East, yes, but not a carry my team on the back when needed star. The league is star-driven. I will say this. I'm a huge DeMar DeRozan fan. He's super fun to watch. That dunk against the Pistons this year was one of the funnest games and funnest moments I can remember watching this Raptors team. But I think it's pretty clear at this point that DeMar DeRozan has issues elevating his game against elite competition in major moments. And it's a fair criticism of him, and I think that in the first paragraph of his bio as of right now, it's going to read lost 10 straight games to the Cleveland Cavaliers and had horrible series.
But here's the thing that I don't get about you. And I'm a philosophy major, or was. So I kind of try and use some reasoning, some deductive logic. And if we agree on premises, then we should agree on the conclusion. And your premises, as you've stated over the last 40 minutes, are they're not going to be able to do something to change the team drastically, like get Kawhi via trade.
Nope.
That DeMar DeRozan, as your best and most expensive player, is not good enough to win a championship.
Nope.
And that the realistic goal for this franchise at this point should be contending for a championship.
No, I think it should be contending in the regular season at this point and trying to get to a championship. But yeah, I think as long as the Warriors are around.
Well, you're getting rid of Casey to take that next step, right?
Yeah,
you could bring Casey back and win another 59 games.
No, I think that you're getting rid of Casey to make sure that you still have a different maybe belief and a different voice in the room. And I think that voices can go stale, and even the greatest coaches don't last forever. Like you look throughout sports history, Popovich has been there, and we've seen Rick Carlisle now for a long time in Dallas, but the best coaches in the NBA, like they all get fired.
Dwane has the third longest tenure.
I'm just saying that everybody you get hired to get fired in this job, and it's a weird timing considering you are in the Coach of the Year candidacy. But yeah, like I've said, I don't do it because I think Dwane Casey stinks. I think that there's a case to be made that you need a fresh voice in the room, and that there's been a bit of a body of work that suggests there's some question marks about him, and that it's time to try something new because you're not going to be able to shuffle this up.
But I say all that to say, if you agree on all those things, especially the piece that states DeMar DeRozan is not at the level to win you a championship, then should you then not agree that you should move off of him however you can and blow it up to look for whoever that player should be? And right, you're not going to get high in the draft. You're not going to be able to trust the process like the Sixers. But there's a chance you could get a Donovan Mitchell or another OG Anunoby. But if you know for certain that DeMar DeRozan isn't that guy.
And yeah, that's what I said, though. I said it's still on the table. I want if the Raptors move off DeRozan, I think it should be for something if they can get a lottery pick or some type of young player with real promise. I just don't think you can do it for the bundle of veteran players. Like I said, the Blake Griffin trade happens, and I think that's still more realistic. I have a tough time believing that, yeah, maybe some team like the Sacramento Kings or the Orlando Magic bails you out, and not bails you out, but gives you a Godfather deal for DeRozan, and you can take it. But I just don't see that being as likely. I want to fly through a few more of these. Mohammed tweets in at AboFarah09. Don't waste your time. Raps need a complete overhaul. Casey can stay. Blame DeRozan, Lowry, and the rest of the players for lousy effort. Again, I do feel for Dwane Casey because he did get a really lousy effort from DeRozan. I'm less critical of Lowry because I really do think Lowry brought it for a few games. Like, he had some real moments in the postseason, and he dragged them out of that 17-point hole in Game 3. Just Trevor, at Clever Trevor, tweets in, just thinking about how this series could have been so different if the Raptors acquired DeAndre Jordan at the trade deadline. Well, there's always next year if LeBron goes to the Lakers. Hashtag SN Raps. I also have another tweet up here that I'm going to read because it pairs with this one about how the Raptors, this was it, from Jay Narco. This season was lost when the Raptors made no moves at the trade deadline to resolve three-point deficiency. With all the East peers, they made moves to resolve their issues, plus playing so hard in Game 82, leaving Fred VanVleet for injury. So a couple of things here. One is that, yeah, the Raptors tried to add to their wing depth, but Marco Bellinelli wanted to go to a different team, and what were they going to trade for? They already had such a deep team. They couldn't find room for anybody. Like, they weren't going to.
And more importantly, who were you going to trade?
Right, totally. If you look at how you trade in this league, the Raptors weren't trading. They couldn't get a better player than the guys that are making no money for this team. Like, dudes are making $1 million or around $1 million on this team. You're not upgrading that through a trade. The DeAndre Jordan thing, it would have come at the expense of Jonas Valanciunas. And was JV the issue in this series? Like, there were some matchup problems there, but JV played with heart, man. JV, to me, has turned himself into a real asset from being a guy where we weren't sure how he was going to fit in the modern NBA. And again, didn't think he should have played as many minutes against Kevin Love this series. But I think Jonas Valanciunas is one of the only Raptors that can go into the offseason holding his head up high based on the way that he played this year.
And there's this small part that moving forward after this season, JV could make half as the amount that DeAndre Jordan makes. So even if you want to argue that DeAndre Jordan's a better player, he's not that much better.
Yeah, I'm not a huge DeAndre Jordan guy either. I think that he could have helped mask some of the defensive issues that they had. He would have been a better fit in this series. He could have maybe given you a little bit more of like the Bismack Biyombo look that you had a couple of years ago, where he had a stretchy big that could give the LeBron some problems and in some switches and get rebounds and block some shots. But I've never been a huge DeAndre Jordan fan. Like, he's not the guy for me. Rob Curran, I hear Becky Hammon is looking for a job. ... If the Raptors do decide to move off Dwane Casey, I hope they interview Becky Hammon. I hope that they at least take a look at her if she's not already scooped up by somebody else, and that they entertain the idea. Because again, she's been with an organization for a really long time. She obviously knows the game. She comes with rave reviews, and I don't see how there's I could see a possibility where she ends up being the coach, and that's not just a pandering thing. It's like she's clearly got the track record to be interviewed right now. I wouldn't say just hand her the job, though, because I don't know if she's ready to be an NBA coach yet.
Well, there certainly wouldn't be a lack of openness or willingness to envision her in that role. The Raptors, whether it's front of house, back of house, they have more females in big positions than any other team in the NBA. They've got an assistant coach on their G League team. They've got someone working analytics. The head of their PR is a female. Their broadcaster of their G League team is a female. In their business operations, it's run by a female. So Masai has spoken often about the fact that you need different experiences, different voices in a front office. And I don't see why he would think any differently about Becky Hammon.
Going from a team to like San Antonio to a place like Toronto, I think it could be a decent fit. The only thing I would have my reservations of is that if you're going to Becky Hammon, is that the spot you want to be as someone who is going to be like, listen, man, I hope people didn't read these comments, but people saw like when Becky Hammon was first reported to be visiting with the Bucks, like there's some backwards thinking people out there, and there will be a lot of people rooting for her to fail. And to go to a place like Toronto where, you know, there's a big potential for a step back and some uncertainty with your players and a potential rematch with the Cavs. Like, I do wonder maybe if having her go to a job where right out of the gate the expectation is get to a finals would be like, that's a lot to ask. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, but I think for a long time when you look at minority coaches getting into roles, they were stuck with terrible jobs. And then they were set up to fail. And when you look at the people making the decision, theoretically, assuming that Dwane Casey isn't staying, you're talking about the guy who's the first black GM in the NBA, in Wayne Embry, and the first African-born GM in the NBA, in Masai Ujiri. So I don't think, again, that the fact that this may not be a great spot for another first is going to phase them. Actually,
kind of like the Raiders, man, could do the Amy Trask move. Like that's Becky Hammond's. Like
true.
this Raptors are the Raiders.
The other
not badass though.
Other name I would know. Another name I would be open for from the Spurs would be Ettore Messina, a guy who has obviously European ties, has a great coaching legacy of his own right. He's been a great coach himself. Did a great job. I mean, it was 2 games, but it did a great job filling in for Pop when he was away with the Spurs. He's a guy who's a god in the coaching circles in Italy, and I think he would be a fit as well.
So we're going to run just a little long here because I want to hit a couple more tweets because people have been so good in supporting this, and I just do want to get to a couple more of these things. So Anson Kwan tweets in, what did the Indiana team have that pushed the Cavs to 7 that the Raptors didn't have? Mental toughness, clutchness, good coaching, question mark. Hashtag SNRaps. I don't know why I say question mark. I'm a little tired. So Anson, I think a couple of things. One is that I still think that the Pacers had a little bit of the element of surprise, that LeBron James was preparing for this Raptors team all season long. I think that he knew that he was going to cross paths with them and that he was ready for them, and he has a familiarity with them, and he's not afraid of them, and there's nothing about it. 2 is that I think there's a roster composition aspect here that we addressed a little bit earlier, where if you look at what they have, they have Victor Oladipo and Lance Stevenson and Bojan Bogdanovic and I'm blanking on his name, Thad Young, where they have all these players that can actually give you a few minutes on LeBron James, give him different looks, and also they did better with their game plan of staying home on the shooters and letting LeBron beat them. So I do think that it was all of the above, honestly. I think there was a real mental toughness. I think they were clutch. They never allowed leads to go to 20, would be down 12, and they would fight back in the ball games. They never said die. They never quit like the Raptors did in this series. And they got good coaching, and they stuck to their game plan. So I really think that was the biggest difference. And their best player was better than the Raptors' best player in Victor Oladipo. Like, did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think their bench, even though it was smaller, was better than the Raptors' bench.
Yeah, they were more effective.
The Cavs won this series when LeBron was off the floor. They were actually, somehow they were +3 when LeBron wasn't on the floor. Now, mind you, when LeBron was on the floor, and this is the stat of the series, he was +178 in 4 games. But for the Raptors to win this series, their bench had to do what their bench did all year, and that was bludgeon teams to death as one of the best 5-man lineups in the NBA, and they didn't do that. And give them credit again. They're not a deep bench, but every guy for the Pacers who came off that bench played a significant role in their
contributed.
success.
They really did. Ahmed Raps fan, at B-Ball fan 22. Masai has been the most patient GM in the NBA. This year has to be the year he makes a big shakeup. Who comes first? Hashtag SNRaps. We've talked about it throughout the show today, but I think that it's going to be Dwane Casey. I don't think that you think it's going to be anyone that you don't have enough of a feel for it.
I don't know. I have no idea. And you talked about Masai being angry in his season-ending address a year ago. The other thing that to me was telling, because we all have talked about the fact that he used the words cultural reset. We talked about it all year. The other thing he said in that press conference that gets forgotten is he said, guys, this is stupid. I have no answers for you. It would be irresponsible for me to say anything today. Mm-hmm. So this is all a waste of time, but I have to be here, so let's talk.
And guess what? He was like, it was a waste of time, it's irresponsible, except for it gave us content for the entire year, Masai.
It's 100% did. Because we used culture reset in every piece and every talking
every
point.
Single one.
But he didn't know what he was going to do at that point. Whether he is back at BioSteel tomorrow or the day after, he's not going to know what he was going to do. I mean, I guess he had a lot of time to prepare because after game 2, you kind of knew how this was going. But he's not going to know what the landscape of the league is. All he knows right now is he needs to somehow find a way to get into the draft. But even if he does, that's still going to add more decisions because you can't just add another competitive basketball player on this roster and expect to get anything out of them when you're already playing 11, 12 deep.
Lee MacArthur tweets in, and Lee, tweet back and explain what you mean. But how much blame should the advanced scouting department get? Hashtag SNRaps. Do you know what that... To me, I think that, like, if you're talking about advanced scouting of the Cavs, or like if you're talking about scouting for the department where they draft, like they've hit on everything except for Bruno Caboclo.
I assume he meant the Cavs.
But like, yeah, the advanced scouting comes down to the coaching staff, and we've said that they share a portion of this. They share an absolute portion of this. There are some inexcusable things to me. How long it took them to figure out no more JV on Kevin Love. And people were tweeting into, why did JV only play so few minutes? He was playing great. It's like, because they were playing him on Tristan Thompson, and he had success because he could play well defensively and offensively against that player. So that's why it worked out. But he's not built to defend Kevin Love. And frankly, neither is Serge Ibaka, but they had to at least try it in this game. And the results were mixed. I actually thought that the starting lineup tonight was the one that made the most sense for me out of the gate, other than potentially not having CJ Miles in there. I thought that third spot could have been a little different. I'd always thought maybe Siakam with that starting group, or even DeLon Wright, but that was fine for me too. I just thought that Serge should have been at the 5 a lot longer. And there were some things, like I had some problem with some things in this series from the coaching staff, but I think the Raptors had to execute the game plan. I think they told them to stay on those shooters, to fight through screens, that they practiced those things, and they didn't execute them. So they bear some of the blame. And Ahmed tweeted in with that, what comes first. He said, what are the chances we can bundle a few of the bench mob and package it for a third star? Not a Jimmy, or not a superstar, but a Jimmy type. Hashtag SN Raps. I assume you mean Jimmy Butler type, and he's better than any player on the Raptors right now, so he wouldn't be. I don't think you can, because again, the contracts, like you don't have the contracts with those young guys. And if you're packaging with someone, like, you'd have to do it with like a CJ Miles. And again, like we said throughout the show, I don't think that there's a guy that is part of the bench mob that has the ceiling to be the 4th best player on a title team. Like, it's a 4th or 5th best guy at best. And I think OG is the biggest wild card, but I don't think that you want to move off a 20-year-old OG Anunoby to try to reinforce DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry at this point. Like, I think it's too big of a risk to take.
I think the only really positive is that there are a bunch of teams who have similar issues with less talent.
Mm-hmm.
The entire league is cash strapped. The entire league is up against the cap.
Thank God, because that's how the Raps are keeping Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, true. But the only, unfortunately, two of the teams who have some wiggle room are the Sixers and the Celtics.
The Sixers already have their TJ McConnell. They don't need Fred VanVleet.
No, but I'm just saying, as far as teams who actually have some leeway to make moves and get better, are the two teams who, forget about the Cavs, the two teams that you need to worry about in the East, in the division moving forward.
You know what's insane is that Celtics team, Tatum is showing that he's already a bona fide star. He should have been the number 1 pick. Jaylen Brown is way better than I ever thought he was going to be. Brad Stevens is, without a doubt in my mind, the best head coach in the NBA right now, and that includes Greg Popovich. I wouldn't trade Pop for, if I could pick any coach, I'd take Stevens.
I mean, come on.
And they've already got a bunch of intriguing bench pieces that they could have, like a Terry Rozier. They're going to get back. They've already got one of the best defensive players, best all-around players in the game in Al Horford. And they've got Kyrie Irving coming back and Hayward. But also, they have 3 first-round picks in 2019, and they belong to the Sacramento Kings, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Los Angeles Clippers. I shouldn't have ended this on that, because that's depressing. That makes you just feel sad, and it makes it no hope for the future.
Enjoy your Atlantic Division banners while you can.
We're going to be back later in the week. Going to do a free association podcast once we've had a little bit of room to breathe on this. We're going to try to bring in a couple of other people that are smarter than I am, maybe on more of a level as Donovan, and we're going to try to give a little bit more insight. Again, we appreciate everyone that joined us here on Raptors Postgame. Donovan and I both had, I had a lot of fun. I won't speak for Donovan. He had to sit in the room with me again. But this has been Raptors Postgame, which was presented by MasterCard. Proud fan of basketball in the North. Let's start something priceless. Again, thanks to everyone who tuned in, downloaded, subscribed to the podcast, and watched the live stream and watched it on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Have a good night. Have a good offseason.